American, and I cannot wait to represent one more time.
After departing for 9 months and relinquishing his championship, Jon Jones has officially announced his return to the UFC, and this comeback centers around the fight everyone has anticipated, a showdown with Alex Pereira at the White House event. Here's what transpired. Jones made his return official during a March 1, 2026 meet and greet in New Hampshire, where he confirmed to fans what he had been suggesting for months.
I'm in negotiations with the UFC about this White House thing as well. Very proud American, and I cannot wait to represent one more time.
The confirmation is now concrete. Jones is actively negotiating with the UFC to compete on the White House card set for June 14, 2026, meaning his retirement is officially over. This revelation came just days after a seismic shift occurred in the UFC landscape when Dana White announced on February 27 that Alex Pereira had vacated his light heavyweight championship to pursue heavyweight glory. Pereira's goal is unprecedented, becoming the first three-division champion in UFC history, which opened opportunities for Jerry Prochazka versus Carlos Ulberg at UFC 327 for the vacant 205-pound title, but more significantly, it positioned Pereira as a heavyweight free agent and the most compelling opponent for Jones. Ariel Helwani analyzed the situation immediately following Pereira's vacancy announcement, explaining the current state of negotiations.
Alex Pereira is no longer the light heavyweight champion. And I can tell you right here and now that there have been some talks of him fighting Jon Jones.
Helwani confirmed that these talks involve the White House card specifically.
Jon Jones on the White House card is not dead, but I could tell you I don't feel as of right now a ton of positive momentum in that direction, but I'm not here to tell you that it.
The fight remains in active discussion rather than finalized, with Jones clearly wanting Pereira seeking heavyweight opportunities, and the UFC at minimum engaging in serious conversations. Jones has articulated precisely why he prefers this matchup over all other possibilities, explaining his reasoning during a recent discussion with Jeffrey Wu about his motivations and priorities.
Some of my motivations aren't traditional anymore. You know, I don't think I care about what most fighters would care about.
Yeah.
Most fighters wouldn't turn down $30 million.
Jones referenced the reported $30 million offer he declined to face Tom Aspinall in November 2025, choosing instead to pursue the Pereira fight because he views it as the superior legacy opportunity.
It's a more matter of legacy. What would make more sense?
Yeah.
Do you fight the guy who is impressive right now, who no one, I don't think, is going to really care about a few years from now?
Jones perceives Pereira as the definitive legacy opponent, a two-division Brazilian champion who has achieved global stardom, someone whose homecoming reception in Brazil resembles that of a returning head of state. Jones wants the opponent that history will remember, rather than simply whoever currently holds the belt, a sentiment he expressed during his appearance on the Dirty Boxing podcast at a Nashville event.
I'd like to fight Alex Pereira at the White House. Yeah.
He elaborated by describing Pereira as a household name and champion who belongs in conversations about the greatest fighters in history, emphasizing the significance of such an opponent for his career legacy.
I just think it would be a blockbuster event. I think the whole world would come out. I've beat many Brazilians over the course of my life.
Jones has clarified his position completely. He wants the White House venue. He wants Pereira as his opponent, and he's actively negotiating to make it happen. But this represents a dramatic shift considering that 9 months ago, this same man had retired from the sport. He contacted Dana White directly and walked away from competition entirely, so understanding Jones's return requires examining both why he initially left and what ultimately changed his mind regarding his retirement decision.
I don't want to say that I'm retired, because fighting's in my blood.
On June 21, 2025, Dana White delivered a shocking announcement to reporters at a UFC event in Baku that left the room completely silent. Jon Jones had called the previous night to retire, making his departure from the sport official without any farewell fight or ceremony. The heavyweight champion simply quit over a phone call, leading Dana to confirm that Tom Aspinall would be elevated to undisputed heavyweight champion without ever receiving the unification bout he had waited over 535 days for, ending the longest interim title reign in UFC history as Jones vacated the belt and the division attempted to move forward. Jones addressed his decision shortly afterward in terms that deliberately left possibilities open for the future.
That's severe arthritis, and most people don't know that. I actually already qualified for a hip replacement.
He stated that he couldn't care less about fighting at that moment, having competed at the highest level his entire life and needing to step away from the sport, but that single word, if, carried enormous significance because 2 weeks later, the conditional became reality. On July 4, 2025, Jones re-entered the UFC's anti-doping testing pool, which is definitely not something a truly retired fighter would do, and under UFC regulations, a fighter requires 6 months of clean testing before being cleared to compete. His pool entry on Independence Day positioned his eligibility window around January 2026, perfectly aligning with preparation for a June 2026 event. And what event could that be, other than the one President Trump had teased just days earlier during a July 2025 Iowa appearance, floating the idea of hosting a UFC card on the White House South Lawn for June 14, 2026, America's 250th anniversary, and Trump's 80th birthday. Dana White described this planned spectacle as a $60 million production with no profit expectations, built entirely around prestige and global exposure, predicting it could become the most watched UFC event in history, and Jones recognized this opportunity immediately, posting on July 4th that he wasn't retired, just recharging, because the itch never leaves, asking what's next for America, in a message perfectly timed for Independence Day, and directly connecting his comeback to the patriotic spectacle being assembled.
That's how life works. I've been an athlete my whole entire life, and it's just something that comes with it. I think I started sports in 7th grade, now I'm almost 40 years old, so it comes with it.
The arthritis originates from years of high-impact takedowns, clinch warfare, and accumulated trauma from fighting at the elite level since his late teens, creating ongoing challenges for his training and competition preparation.
I'm giving Dana his space. You know, Dana has changed my life.
Yes,
he has changed my life. He's changed my children's lives.
Yeah.
Despite receiving a diagnosis that would sideline most athletes, Jones refuses to let arthritis define his final competitive chapter, though the condition creates constant pain, stiffness, and reduced range of motion that severely restricts his ability to train at full intensity. He describes managing arthritis as a daily struggle, with flare-ups forcing him to limit sparring to once or twice weekly, replacing the grinding camp sessions that characterized his younger years with shadowboxing, pad work, yoga for flexibility, cortisone injections, and anti-inflammatory treatments for temporary relief. He has investigated regenerative medicine options, including platelet-rich plasma therapy for his elbow, all in pursuit of extracting one final elite performance from a body that has paid the price of greatness over 2 decades.
And we had a verbal agreement that didn't go over well. Nothing was finalized.
These accumulated injuries have reduced his fighting frequency to a fraction of his previous output, with Jones averaging less than 1 fight per year since 2015, a dramatic contrast to his early UFC days when he competed multiple times annually while appearing indestructible. The 3-year gap between his final light heavyweight bout and heavyweight debut at UFC 285 represented the longest layoff of his career, attributed almost entirely to recovery and precautionary measures designed to prevent career-ending damage. Yet despite everything, the toe, knee, pectoral, and arthritis, Jones maintains these issues haven't diminished his octagon effectiveness, pointing to his recent quick finishes as evidence that intelligent management can compensate for physical limitations. He submitted Cyril Gane in just over 2 minutes and stopped Stipe Miocic with ground strikes, with neither fight requiring prolonged punishment absorption or reliance on his younger self's explosive athleticism, meaning if the White House fight materializes, Jones would need the most carefully tailored training camp of his career, rationing every sparring session, maximizing every recovery window, and operating with razor-thin margins for error regarding his hip, elbow, and reconstructed pectoral. But Jones has never been a fighter who depends solely on durability. He relies on intelligence, preparation, and the ability to end fights before they become wars, an approach that would need to succeed one final time.
But I do admit guilt, not guilt, but I was wrong.
You'll make it right at the White House.
But the things.
The White House fight's significance for Jones transcends spectacle. It's fundamentally about legacy, and legacy for Jon Jones has always generated complicated discussions because while he possesses the most dominant resume in UFC history, he also carries stains that critics will never allow him to completely wash clean. His statistical achievements speak volumes, becoming the youngest UFC champion at 23 by dismantling Mauricio Shogun Rua for the light heavyweight title in 2011, defending that title a record 11 times, while shattering Tito Ortiz's long-standing mark, compiling 8 consecutive defenses that remained unchallenged for years, and building a 28-1 record with 1 no contest that includes victories over a Hall of Fame murderer's row, including Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, Rashad Evans, and Lyoto Makatai. Many defeated in their primes using innovative styles that revolutionized fighter approaches. His 95% takedown defense rate, 84.5-inch reach, longest in UFC history, and 15 title fight victories, organizational record, create a statistical fortress that proves extraordinarily difficult to challenge. with his heavyweight transition only strengthening his case by submitting Gane in 2023 and finishing Miocic in 2024, making him a two-division champion while addressing lingering criticism about dominating a supposedly weaker era, earning endorsements from voices like Joe Rogan and mutual respect acknowledgments from former rivals like Demetrius Johnson, who suggest the GOAT title isn't singular but shared among elites for different reasons.
True or false, guys? Does Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones happen in the year 2026?
True.
It does.
However, the other side of his ledger contains PED history, failed tests, suspensions, and narratives that cling to Jones regardless of clean samples he subsequently provides. Starting with January 2015, when he tested positive for benzoylecgonine, cocaine's primary metabolite, before his UFC 182 victory over Cormier in an out-of-competition test where cocaine wasn't banned outside competition under existing rules, allowing the fight to proceed, but placing a public mark on his reputation. Real damage occurred in 2016 when Jones was flagged by USADA on July 6 for clomiphene and letrozole metabolites, anti-estrogenic substances, from a June sample, pulling him from the UFC 200 main event against Cormier, though USADA determined the substances came from a contaminated sexual performance pill and an arbitration panel imposed only a one-year suspension with no intentional use found, but reputational damage was done. Then August 2017 brought another positive test after his UFC 214 knockout of Cormier, this time for oral turinabol metabolites, a chlorinated anabolic steroid, resulting in the win being overturned to a no-contest title stripping, and as a repeat offender, a 15-month suspension reduced from maximum due to his cooperation with USADA investigations. Though Jones maintained contamination claims without admitting intentional use, a significant 2019 development saw USADA revise detection thresholds for the specific M3 metabolite that flagged him, with the new 0.1 nanograms per milliliter limit, meaning his prior samples wouldn't have triggered violations, leading Jones to publicly state he felt exonerated by the rule change, and no further violations have occurred since 2018, despite passing 42 unannounced tests in 2019 alone. Yet the stain persists, as critics contrast him with Georges St-Pierre's unblemished anti-doping record, frequently citing GSP as the clean GOAT alternative.
You'll say true reluctantly? Like almost like you want it to happen, like you're being cautiously optimistic.
Where does everything proceed from this point? With Jones negotiating, Pereira moving to heavyweight, and the White House card 3 months away, but several significant obstacles exist between today and an octagon on the South Lawn that could derail the entire plan. The primary obstacle involves Dana White's trust, as his billion-to-one comment from August 2025 wasn't casual skepticism but reflected years of accumulated frustration from failed Aspinall negotiations that left deep scars, with White publicly citing Jones' history of cancellations, injuries, and unreliability as reasons to exclude him from the most high-profile card in UFC history, because the White House event isn't merely a fight card but a political and cultural production involving White House staff, Secret Service logistics, and a sitting president's personal reputation, where cancellation wouldn't just cost money, but cause national embarrassment. Helwani directly addressed this tension when discussing Dana White's position on Jones, explaining that the crux of Dana's hesitation isn't whether Jones can fight, but whether Jones will fight, whether he'll reach the cage without injury, legal incidents, or changes of heart derailing the entire production, though Jones appears to understand this dynamic based on his notably humble tone during his Dirty Boxing podcast appearance regarding his relationship with White. He proceeded further by acknowledging fault in how previous negotiations unfolded, taking responsibility for the breakdown in a calculated move to repair the relationship standing between him and the White House octagon. The way previous situations developed left him wondering about his approach, representing a significant public acceptance of responsibility from Jones, who has often been accused of deflecting blame, and he expressed wishes to apologize to Dana face-to-face so they could let bygones be bygones and return to making money for the sport. Helwani summarized the overall sentiment when asked whether this fight would actually happen, expressing cautious optimism while acknowledging the reservations many fans share about getting their hopes up again. He wanted it to happen and acknowledged it would be incredible, but maintained realistic skepticism about the likelihood of everything coming together successfully, given the history involved. That perfectly captures where the MMA world currently stands, cautiously optimistic with all pieces positioned on the board as Jones negotiates, Pereira moves up, and the White House undergoes construction for the most ambitious UFC event ever conceived, with money, prestige, legacy, all pointing toward June 14, 2026. But Jon Jones has been in similar positions before, on the verge of generational fights, only to fail at crossing the finish line. This time he claims it's different. This time it's about representing his country one final time on the biggest stage the sport has ever witnessed, and whether he successfully reaches that destination will determine how the final chapter of the greatest career in MMA history ultimately gets written. So thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, click on one of the boxes appearing on your screen to watch more similar material.